Chasov Yar is burning. Pokrovsk is encircled. Konstantinovka is on the verge. Ukraine's once celebrated fortresses are falling not with a bang, but under a slow, calculated crush. Meanwhile, Western promises fade into silence. Patriot missiles, suspended, hellfires, gone. As America pulls the plug, France calls Moscow, Poland panics. The illusion of unity collapses. This isn't just another update from the front. It's a glimpse into collapsy breakdown, not just of military lines, but of the West's very strategy. And the question isn't whether Ukraine can hold, but for how much longer they'll be ordered to try. We'll unpack the ground war in Chasov Yar and Pokrovsk, the encirclement in Mirnograd, the West's retreat from military aid, and the geopolitical tremors now shaking Paris and Warsaw. And as the renowned actor and narrator Morgan Freeman once said, when the supply lines falter, no strategy can stand. Stay with us till the end. And let us know in the comments, is this collapse by chance or by design? Because what's unfolding now might just redraw the entire map of Eastern Europe. Chasov Yar is no longer just a strategic location on the map. It is becoming a symbol of collapse. Sitting high above the Donetsk plains, the city has long been considered Ukraine's last real barrier before the vast, open lowlands. For over a year, it served as a linchpin in the so-called Eastern Fortress Belt, but that illusion is vanishing fast. According to battlefield updates from channels Aden and Jeroman, nearly the entire area of Nikolaevka, which forms the outer belt of Chasov Yar, is now under Russian control. Ukrainian defenders have already lost the Yuzhny district and are barely holding on in Zemlyanki, officially still part of the Chasov Yar zone. These aren't just tactical retreats. They're signals that the very concept of defending this city is falling apart. Russian units are not attacking haphazardly. They are executing a full-spectrum operation. On the 2nd of July, Moscow unleashed 7 ballistic missile attacks, 50 airstrikes, 60 guided bombs, more than 1,200 kamikaze-type unmanned aerial vehicles, and nearly 4,000 coordinated artillery strikes across the front. The Ukrainian General Staff reported 140 combat clashes in a single day, with 41 of them occurring near Pokrovsk alone. That figure is not just alarming, it is overwhelming. No amount of digital camouflage can hide the fact that the front is disintegrating. Chasov Yar was built up to be a redoubt, a place where defenders could hold fast and deny Russia the high ground. But those hopes are evaporating. Terrain that once offered natural advantage now feels like a trap. Every gain Russia makes here opens new channels for them to sweep into the Donbass heartland. If Chasov Yar falls entirely, which now seems inevitable, the flatlands of eastern Ukraine become vulnerable to direct assaults. Kyiv's military planners are painfully aware of this. They know that losing Chasov Yar would open up a wide corridor of approach toward Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, and the urban networks that remain under Ukrainian control. What makes this moment different is not the speed of Russian advances, but their precision and scale. Unlike earlier in the war, when chaos often led the charge, this phase is methodical. Russian reconnaissance drones map every trench, every strong point. Their artillery wipes out the obstacles. Then infantry and armored units move in with minimal delay. Ukrainian soldiers, many of them exhausted and poorly supplied, are left to hold ruined streets and hollow buildings. This is a war of attrition, one Ukraine can no longer afford. And if Chasov Yar is the crown on Ukraine's eastern defense, then Pokrovsk is the jewel Moscow is already reaching for. What we are witnessing now in the Pokrovsk and Mirnograd sectors is not simply a push, it is the unraveling of an entire military front. Russian forces have already breached the northern defenses, crossing the Kazini Torets River and seizing key strongholds like Novatoretskoye. This was not a lucky punch, it was a precise, coordinated breakthrough. As a result, Ukrainian troops had to abandon Boykovka without a major fight. In the south, Russian troops pressed hard into Fyodorovka, forcing Ukrainian defenders into a desperate holdout using the industrial ruins of the Krasnolimanskaya mine. These aren't just small advances. Each new village captured threatens to collapse the very idea of a sustainable Ukrainian front line. The Russian 51st Guards Combined Arms Army is executing a textbook envelopment maneuver. Their objective is clear: cut off Pokrovsk from the E50 highway, the last viable supply artery from Udakny to Pavlograd. The distance separating them from that vital route, just 8 kilometers. Once that route is severed, Ukrainian troops in Pokrovsk will be cut off from fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. The situation will go from bad to irreversible. Ukrainian command has discussed fallback positions centered around Rodinskoye, Suvarovo, and old minefields near Krasny Liman. But even those positions are no sanctuary. They're desperate attempts to slow down the inevitable. Inside Ukrainian war rooms, there's growing recognition that this is no longer about preserving territory. This is about staving off encirclement, if only for a few days longer. As noted by Russian war analysts, the operation is not being driven by blind ambition. Moscow is calculating its steps carefully, choosing which villages to bypass and which nodes to surround. Their intent is to collapse Ukraine's defensive pockets like a controlled demolition. Morgan Freeman once said, "The West builds its wars on dreams of invincibility, but dreams don't hold ground." That quote feels written for this moment. Pokrovsk was supposed to be untouchable, a hardened zone guarded by multiple overlapping battalions, but maps don't hold lines. Soldiers do. And right now, the only thing standing between Pokrovsk and total envelopment is time, and time is running out. Even pro-Ukrainian sources like Patriots admit the gravity of the situation. According to their updates, Russian troops are attacking across a broad front, from Novotoretskoye to Koptevo and Mirnoye, covering a space over 7 kilometers wide and 21 square kilometers in area. They are pressing deeper into areas like Rezino and Nikolaevka, while also probing toward Udakny and Molodetskoye. These aren't random targets. They are the logistical lungs of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd system. If they go, the entire defense breathes its last breath. And as illusions of holding firm begin to fade, the fire now spreads toward Konstantinovka, the next domino in the path. What's unfolding in Konstantinovka is not an isolated crisis. It is part of a slow, calculated unraveling of the entire Eastern Front. As Ukrainian forces buckle under pressure in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, the ripple effect is being felt further east. Konstantinovka, once considered a secondary target, is now in Moscow's direct line of advance. The situation has become more critical with the erosion of Ukrainian positions north of Mirnograd, leaving Konstantinovka's flanks increasingly exposed. Russia is now applying simultaneous pressure from at least 3 axes, using a combination of deep strike artillery, reconnaissance drones, and mechanized assault groups to stretch Ukrainian defenses to the breaking point. Inside Ukraine's high command, the choices are narrowing rapidly. Should they reinforce Rodinskoye with the last available reserves, hoping to delay a southern breakthrough, or should they pull units from other areas, risking collapse elsewhere? The harsh truth is, they no longer have the manpower to cover all fronts. According to battlefield reports cited by Patriots, Ukrainian staff officers now speak openly about the impossibility of holding a coherent defensive line if the enemy breaches Udakny and Molodetskoye. And those areas are already under increased Russian pressure. This is classic positional warfare. Stretch your opponent, force them to cover a wider area than they can manage, then punch through the center when they falter. What makes the situation worse is the imbalance of momentum. Russia has shifted from cautious probing to a steady, confident advance. They are exploiting every Ukrainian delay in decision-making. Reports indicate that the northern extension of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd defensive bubble is now being attacked at multiple points, causing AFU planners to scramble, reposition forces, and commit reserves in fragmented ways. The longer Ukraine hesitates, the more opportunity Russia has to shape the battlefield. The supply lines around Konstantinovka are already being disrupted. Rear depots are under drone surveillance. Every truck movement is a potential target. This is not the war Kyiv's generals were prepared to fight. It is not a battle for villages. It is a slow disintegration of structure, logistics, and time. Russian forces don't need to take Konstantinovka in one massive strike. They are applying constant pressure, destabilizing the rear, and allowing the front to collapse from within. When Ukrainian soldiers begin abandoning positions not because of combat losses, but because their flanks disappear and resupply is impossible, that is when the war reaches a new phase. And as the lines collapse in the east, the West's commitment, once loud and proud, is unraveling even faster. The silence from Washington is now louder than any promise made over the past 2 years. Under the administration of President Donald Trump, the United States has officially suspended all remaining arms transfers to Ukraine. No more Patriot missile batteries. No more guided Hellfire rounds. No GMLRS. No Stinger systems. No 155mm artillery shells. The message could not be clearer. The arsenal of democracy is closed out of stock, out of will. The official justification is that America must focus its resources on competition with China. But for Ukraine, this is less about Asia and more about abandonment. Across Europe, the shock is palpable. According to French presidential channels, Emmanuel Macron placed a direct phone call to Vladimir Putin, their first conversation in nearly 3 years. Paris has broken the wall of silence, a clear indicator that France is no longer comfortable isolating itself from Moscow. In Warsaw, the mood is sour. Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, speaking to national reporters, admitted that the U.S. decision was not good news. He stressed that Ukraine needs support to survive. His words were blunt, his tone resigned. Even Poland, one of Ukraine's fiercest backers, is now speaking in the past tense. And yet, despite these diplomatic signals, the old narrative still lingers. Kosiniak-Kamysz insisted that Russia had no interest in ceasefires or negotiations, even as his European allies quietly test the waters for dialogue. It is a contradiction that exposes just how deeply Western policy is divided. On one hand, there is an official posture of resistance. On the other, backroom phone calls to the Kremlin suggest a growing fatigue and perhaps even a pivot toward de-escalation. From Moscow's perspective, it's all unfolding as expected. The Russian strategy has always relied less on military spectacle and more on grinding down its opponents economically, politically, and psychologically. Now, with Ukraine's Western lifeline severed and European leaders beginning to break ranks, the broader architecture of Western resolve is crumbling. As one Russian commentator put it bluntly, we don't chase ghosts, we wait for them to disappear. Morgan Freeman, with his voice of timeless wisdom, once remarked, "In war, you don't need to break your enemy, just their illusions." Today, those illusions are breaking faster than any frontline trench. The idea that the West could outlast Russia economically, sustain unlimited arms shipments, and maintain strategic unity, those ideas are dead. All that remains is a growing silence. And while Ukraine's Western patrons grow quiet, Russia pushes forward, battle by battle, breach by breach. On the 2nd of July alone, the battlefield across Ukraine lit up with terrifying intensity. 140 combat engagements took place in just 24 hours, 7 missile launches, 50 separate airstrikes, 60 guided aerial bombs, over 1,200 suicide drones, nearly 4,000 artillery bombardments. These figures were not leaked. They were officially acknowledged by the Ukrainian armed forces. And yet, across Western newsrooms, the story remains frozen in time. The favorite phrase? Stalemate. A word that tries to cover a hemorrhage with a band-aid. From the forests of Kupiansk to the industrial zones of Dnipro, Ukrainian defense lines are holding barely. These aren't consolidated defensive belts anymore. They are overstretched, crumbling pockets, constantly shifting under pressure. And this is not a sudden collapse. It is a sustained grinding down, a methodical removal of Ukraine's ability to resist. Even pro-Kyiv sources like the Patriots channel now admit that Russia is conducting what they call a systematic deconstruction of the entire defensive front. It's not flashy, it's not cinematic, but it works. This is not the kind of warfare that fits Western expectations. There are no quick victories, no stirring footage of flag raisings or dramatic drone hits edited for social media. What Russia is doing now is old-school attrition, structured, predictable, and devastating. It wears down ammunition stocks. It exhausts personnel. It destroys logistics, one trench at a time. And most importantly, it doesn't stop for the camera. NATO-style warfare often relies on perception management. Russia's style relies on outcome. As Morgan Freeman once narrated in a reflection on conflict, wars aren't won with showmanship. They're won with endurance, calculation, and an unrelenting will. That observation rings truer than ever today. The front lines are not static. They're being redrawn day by day. Western analysts who continue to speak of a stalemate are not just behind the curve. They are reading from a different script altogether. The irony is that the harder Ukraine fights to hold symbolic positions like Chasov Yar or Pokrovsk, the more predictable its movements become, and the easier it is for Russia to apply pressure exactly where it hurts. The illusion of static defense is allowing Russian commanders to plan confidently, to coordinate strikes with precise timing, and to convert limited advances into irreversible territorial shifts. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military is stretched thinner and thinner, reacting more than acting. So the question isn't just how far Ukraine can hold. It's how much longer the world will pretend this unraveling is not already well underway. By now, the picture is unmistakable. Chasov Yar is on the verge. Pokrovsk is being surrounded. Konstantinovka is exposed. What once appeared to be isolated breakthroughs have become a cascading failure of the Ukrainian defense arc. But what's collapsing is not just a front line. It is an entire Western narrative. In Washington, President Donald Trump has frozen all weapons deliveries. In Paris, Emmanuel Macron is dialing the Kremlin. In Warsaw, Polish officials express regret without action. The mighty arsenal of democracy has not just been delayed, it is being mothballed. Ukraine's soldiers are still expected to fight, but with what? No Patriots, no Stingers, no restocks of artillery shells. The skies are lost. The trenches are crumbling. And the leadership abroad is whispering retreat while speaking of resolve. This is the moment Morgan Freeman warned about when he said, "When a nation fights for illusions, it bleeds for nothing." That illusion that Ukraine could outlast a patient, industrialized Russia with borrowed tools and temporary headlines is dissolving. The high-velocity missile deliveries, the dramatic funding packages, the visits from Western leaders with solemn handshakes, they're gone. All that's left are exhausted men with no air support, guarding cities already marked on Russian maps. Yet still, some Western officials talk about more support soon. The uncomfortable truth is, Even if the weapons arrive, they may come too late. Russia has already shifted into long-term strategic mode, building factories, rotating forces, expanding production. This isn't just a war anymore. It's a contest of civilizations, one that Ukraine is being left to lose alone. So what comes next? Will Kyiv hold the line, or will the next city fall before anyone in Brussels dares admit reality? Will the West adapt, or will they keep rewriting press releases while Ukraine buries another brigade? Let us know your thoughts. Is the turning point behind us, or is the great unraveling only beginning?